Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Kaffee and Kuchen with Internationals. I am your host, Anne Lassé, and I'm here today with Lora. I'm very excited to have her here in the room with me. She's been an inspiration to me on and off and still is. So I'm excited to be having this conversation with her today.
Thank you,
Lora,
Anne.
I'm going to pass to you, and you can just introduce a little bit about who you are, maybe where you are based in Germany, and where you're from.
Okay. I am on the east side of Stuttgart, and this is my second time in Germany. And my first time in Germany, I was in Frankfurt. So I have lived in different parts of Germany. I am originally American. And I am married to a German, and my kids are now dual citizens. So I'm in a multicultural house, and sometimes feel like I'm the only one who's, let's say, the foreigner or the one who's struggling. So that's it in a nutshell. I can say more if you want to hear more about my professional background or whatever, but that's kind of the basics of like who I am and where I'm from.
Yeah, awesome. I feel like kids, we can come back to that. I can relate to this feeling. I think this could resonate with other mothers out there. So I think it could be an interesting topic to go over. But let's come back to it. I want to first talk a little bit about why the motivation to come here. I'm guessing family, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. So many years ago. So I have been abroad now 18 years. So way back in the beginning, when I was contemplating this experience, it wasn't a given. I had just finished taking the bar exam, so I'm a lawyer, and how maybe it's helpful to go a little bit back in time about what's the connection to Germany, even for me, because it goes back further in time. So when I was in school, we had to take a language, and there were a number of choices. So at that time, it was German, Spanish, and French. And my parents said, well, German's the hardest language, so that's the one that'll be most challenging for you, and you're bored at school, so do that one. And I was like, okay, I didn't know the difference. I didn't have any curiosity about it. So I ended up in German class, and I took a couple of years of German that was required. And in the process, as I got into high school, we started at our school taking German exchange students. And we never took one because I can't explain why. We just never raised our hand for it. And then there was a year where there was a student who didn't have a family. And the people who were organizing it, of course, had interviewed the families and knew more about the people and said, this young man is really wonderful and comes from a wonderful family, and we just haven't placed him. Would you be willing? And my parents were like, I don't know, young man, like, and it's our daughter, it's a little bit strange. But anyway, they decided to do it. They figured, well, 6 weeks, because that's how long it was. What could go wrong in 6 weeks? And of course, nothing went wrong in 6 weeks. He was a very wonderful young man. And of course, that was the beginning of how I ended up in Germany, because after I took the bar exam, I knew as an American I wouldn't have much vacation left. Because you get 2-3 weeks or something, and it's very hard to take as an American. And I thought, I'll never be able to go and visit Europe for a longer period, so I'll go and see my exchange family. And we had already been exchanging over the years, so it's not like it was sort of some random thing. It was sort of my turn to come. And I did. And when I was there, my exchange student, who was at that point was a working professional out of university, took me to meet some of his friends. And there was my future husband. Yeah.
Wow.
So now that I've met I didn't know he was my future husband then. I met somebody who I had an interest in, but I already had a job in America. I had that lined up. So we, let's say, can you say dated long distance? It feels kind of archaic now. But anyway, that's what we were doing for 3 years. We visited and called each other. And there was a certain point in time where it was, well, somebody's got to do something, because we can't carry on like this forever. We didn't want to anyway. And I decided it would be me. I didn't like working as a lawyer, at least not in the setup that I had. And I thought, well, I'll come to Germany. Let's see how that goes, which is interesting, because if you had to pick between our language abilities, his English is fantastic and my German is very minimal, still is not that great. And so I moved to Frankfurt. That's how I ended up in Frankfurt. And I went to an LLM program, which is an advanced degree in law. And the whole program was in English. And I ended up staying there and working there. So that's how I ended up in Germany. It was a mixture of love interest and sort of what do I do with my career? And it came together in that way. And I don't know, is the rest history? It's of course not. It's still being created, but that is how I am here, even as in a second round, and still with the same now husband.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Oh, there's so much in that. So you came here, I guess, and was able to start as a lawyer in Germany. And how was that for you? Obviously, the language, if you were able to working in English as well.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
that's obviously a big advantage.
Yeah. It's a great question, because when I decided to start that school, I didn't really know what would happen. And because my German wasn't that great, I actually didn't really think that much about it. I just said, well, I'm going to do this program and see. And as a part of that program, they required an internship. And so they lined up the work. It's just temporary work, right? And I ended up at a firm in a group where they really needed people, and the work was international. And all the contracts were in English, the negotiations were everything was in English. It's just the sort of side conversations, and some of the trainings were in German.
Mm-hmm.
So they hired me out of the internship, and I'm like, wait, what's happening here? Because I didn't really plan this out, and is this really going to work? And I struggled a lot, because when the social language isn't your strength, it's sort of, I want to participate, but I don't really know what's going on, or at least not some of the time. And then some of the trainings were in German. So I'm like, well, this is going to be really hard for me to advance here. And I ultimately figured out for myself that there was a bit of a ceiling there as a foreigner. And what made it harder was, yes, learning German would solve a lot there, but not everything. So learning German would help me, right, do a lot of things, but it wouldn't change the fact that I'm not a German lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And doing that, I would have to start from the beginning again. I don't know how many years, 5, 6, 7. I have no idea how many years here. It's a very long time. So I was always going to have some kind of issue. And going back to the language point, I was working 14, 16 hours a day. And then trying to learn German on top, like my brain was fried already, and I was just making very, very little progress. So I just kind of knew this wasn't how that was going to go ultimately. And because I'm in Germany and I'm there for someone who's German, I kind of just sort of let go and was like, okay, I think this is not what it's meant to be like. And realizing that was like 15 years ago. It was a different time. Like now online, there's so many possibilities about finding things, finding people, understanding all of the different paths. It was just a different time of life. And I just sort of was like, I think this is it for me. I'm not going to be a lawyer again. And I haven't been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, before I came here as well, I was also in, I guess, a profession of some sort, landscape architect. So also have qualifications. And I felt the same. I felt that I didn't want to go back to doing that when I came here. And I want to talk a little bit or hear a little bit from you about the energy drain of being surrounded by another language and having to speak another language, learn a new culture, and all of that on top of a profession that is fairly high stress.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously in the end for you, it was choose something different, but what would you say to people that might be in that right now?
It's hard, because even though I do this work now where I'm supporting people, it takes me in a way back to where I struggled and how it felt really impossible. Like I'm never going to, because it wasn't just the language and the culture around me. I was also without any family or friends.
Yeah.
I was also right in a demanding profession, but I was in a new area of the profession. So I was learning all sorts of stuff that I hadn't had to deal with before. And I felt buried by it, honestly. and which is part of the reason why I was like, that's it, I'm out, bye. Now I'm on the other side of it, and I work with a lot of people who are in these circumstances. So even lawyers who are working abroad, for example, so almost like the mirror image of me. And what I think makes a difference is there's a quote out there that actually I don't like it because I don't like the idea of eating an elephant, but this sort of, if you're going to eat an elephant, how do you go about it? It's one bite at a time, like everything else. Yeah. So what are the small things that you can do and succeed with, and then go from there and build on that? It's when you look at the big picture, like we're doing, and like, oh, it's language, it's culture, it's so overwhelming. You just, anybody would freeze or quit. I mean, it's understandable, right? So how do we step out of that and say, okay, but I'm not starting from zero, actually. I'm not starting from zero in my profession. I'm not starting from zero in my language. Even if you can say hello and guten tag, I mean, you're still better than zero, right? Yeah. Same thing culturally. Like, even though I'm American, and sometimes I feel like where I came from, it was very sort of closed. There wasn't a lot of diversity. It's not true. If I look around, I can say, okay, so there's diversity in class, diversity in, let's say, heritage further back, diversity in intelligence, right? So we're never starting from zero, and to recognize where you are starting from, and then just one step at a time.
Such good advice. I think it's really, really good advice. And I think also for people just to know that it is hard and that they're not alone in that feeling, and what they're doing in that situation is difficult, and just to acknowledge and be compassionate to oneself about that.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I remember thinking back in my Frankfurt job, so I wasn't on Facebook back then, and I wasn't really on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn was tiny, at least relatively speaking. And there were a couple of people in the office who were, let's say, like me, in quotes, like people who weren't German. German wasn't their first language. They were foreign lawyers, but there weren't that many. And we were so busy working that there really wasn't an opportunity to come together a lot and be like, wow, this sucks sometimes, right? Or like, how are you managing it? We just didn't have the space for that. And finding people. I mean, of course, that's what you're doing here is bringing people out as examples of what's possible, but really continuing to work on that, right? Even if you're in some Facebook groups, of course, that's helpful, but yeah, meet somebody, like actually physically meet somebody, or try some different groups that are out there, and eventually you do find people, and sometimes they're in unexpected places. Like one of my, I would say, best friends here, she's a parent from one of the other kids where my daughter was in kindergarten. Yeah, so she is a local German, and she came up to him. She's like, "Oh, I'm so excited to meet somebody else." And she sort of caged onto me, and I'll never forget that, because it goes against at least what I have been told that Germans are like. Yeah. She was coming to me and wanted to befriend me, and that was unexpected. And of course, I was like, "Yes, I'm in. Let's be friends." Yeah.
Okay, so network and finding your people, and you've obviously. There's a few things here. You've been through a career change, and we've started talking about that a little bit. That was part of your journey, right? And also you have this Facebook group, which I imagine was also a big part of finding your community and figuring out what gaps you had into the path that you were wanting to create for yourself, and then filling that gap. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So one of my personal stances is, if you don't like how something is going, if you wait, nobody's going to come to rescue you. You're the only one who can change your situation, and change it in a way that feels like it will fit you. So how the International Women Entrepreneur Group came about was when I decided I would start a business here. I went into Facebook, and I started to look for groups that I felt like, okay, I'm an entrepreneur. Like, I want to be with people like that. I want to be able to ask questions and find resources. And I tried that, and I didn't like the groups. They were either quiet, or I felt like, I just don't feel comfortable asking here. I'm not really sure why, but where I got to in my mind, whether that's true or not, that was just a story I told myself at the time, was I think there aren't any women's groups. And so I talked to a friend that's also the reason why I did it, or we did it, because I felt like I was asking her all of the time. I was kind of annoying her with a lot of questions. I was like, that's not really, I want to keep her as a friend. I don't want to scare her away with all my questions. And I just said, would you do this group with me? And she said, yes. And that's how this group came about. But I also founded or co-lead 2 other ones for the exact same reason, right? So when I felt alone as a lawyer, I knew there were more of us, but I didn't know how many, like foreign lawyers abroad. And so now there's a women's group for women expat lawyers and law students, and it has thousands of people. I thought there were more, but I didn't know there would be that many, and it's still growing. So it's the same. Like, how can I sort of, let's say, write a part of my past for other people, right? I can remember how that felt and give people a space to come together. And then I also do one for lawyers coaching lawyers, because, right, that's my background, and now I'm a coach. And it was the same point. I want to be with people who are like what I'm doing, but I don't know where that group is. So I created it. And I realize not everybody's going to run around and create Facebook groups. That's not the point here, but sort of how do you see the gap, as you I think very, very smartly called it, and fill it for yourself? Because, I mean, you can continue to feel frustrated and like, I don't like this group, I don't like the tone of it, or this network doesn't seem to fit with what I want. And for sure there are more people like you. How do you go about finding them and it sort of helping you to get the resources and support that can make your experience, I would even say, far, far better than I ever imagined. Like, in the beginning, way back when I first moved to Germany, I was like, I can't imagine living here. I don't like it. And now I'm like, hey, like, this is pretty good. Like, I'm liking it. And a part of that is because I did the work to make it feel better for myself.
Mm-hmm. That's inspiring. That's amazing. And not always easy. I think even if you have the idea and maybe you start it, to actually turn it into something that works and that other people want, I think can be difficult.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested what you did, like how you've got thousands of people in your groups. That's amazing.
Yeah.
How did you make that happen?
I would say persistence and sweat. I mean, there were times in all of these groups, and I still think that about one of them actually. Is this working? Like, it's working for me, but is it working for everybody who's in there? And should I just close it? Should I just call it, quit it, and be like, nah, that was a nice test? And what I found, it's a very small case study of 3 here, but out of the 2 that have grown to be bigger, I remember that period where I was like, wow, there's like 30 people here, or there's like 50, like, is this really something? And when I just said, it is something, I believe in it, something bigger is ahead for it. Just wait, sit with that really awful discomfort of like, did I just like commit professional suicide here? Just sit with that and know that there's a reason why it all happened that way. Mm-hmm. And just believe that there's something bigger out there for it. And it's even the same with the group we're in together. Wow, it already feels like there's a lot of people. Like, what more could there be? But there's something else coming. And to just sort of let it unfold and know that whatever it feels right to me to do to contribute. So, for example, with our group, I don't talk about it that much more in other groups. But with the other ones, I still, if I see somebody, I feel like, oh, that seems like that would fit better in this other group, I'll mention it. And that's how the groups have not the only way the groups have grown, but it's seeding the thoughts everywhere and just sort of letting go. Like, maybe it'll work and maybe it won't. And at a certain point in time, if I'm no longer meant to be involved with it, or if it's, I'll know. And to just trust, which I think is also just a big part of, it's like a parallel part of being an expat or living abroad, is for whatever reason you decided this, and maybe it's clear to you and maybe it's not, but there you are. And sort of, how can you continue to sort of listen to yourself and say, well, I did this for a reason, and it's going to make sense later if it doesn't make sense now, and let go.
Yeah. Did you have to actively choose that did that come naturally, I guess, that trust in that things will work out, and that self-belief and the belief that everything happens for a reason? Or is that something that you actively fostered?
I think both, because back when I was a lawyer, for example, I really felt like I should be doing that, and giving that up, if you will, as a profession, or let's say a direct profession. Yeah, we all have those voices inside, like, well, what was all that for then? Like, what a waste of time, and that sunk cost feeling, like, yeah, but I've invested so much, and or other people expect things out of me now, or whatever. Back then, it felt very heavy and hard, like I've made a mistake, I'm embarrassed, whatever. In the meantime, part of it's because of being in coaching and of changing our mindsets and understanding ourselves and how the world is in different ways. Just started to see it all differently. Like, well, that didn't go as I originally expected, but what's happened later shows me why it went the way it did. Yeah. So some people will find their purpose in life right up front and can just, plow forward in a straight line. But the rest of us sort of are constantly like, is this really what I'm meant to be doing? Or maybe it's more over here. And sort of, whether we're doing it consciously or subconsciously, is sort of trying to take paths towards what makes sense to us. So now I can look back and see all of that struggle and say, right, but I'm using that now in a way I hadn't expected. And whether that's the ultimate reason why it all happened that way, or whether there's still more to come, what can I control over that, other than to just, change a decision or whatever? The rest is sort of not in my hands. So that was a very indirect, very long answer to your question. So kind of a mixture of both.
Yeah, makes sense. I think often things are a mixture of multiple things, right? Like there's
Yeah.
never one answer.
Yeah, no, that's not, it's not so black and white.
Yeah. Okay, so I said we'll come back to kids, right? Having kids in a foreign country.
Yeah.
Are you happy just to talk a little bit about the experience of raising children in Germany?
Yeah, sure. The thing that sticks out for me first is how to balance multiple cultures in your home and even within yourself. So I am American, and that's it for me. That's how I would describe it. I think my husband would say he's German, and that's it. He's German. But then I have two kids who are both in a way, and how to help them to identify, accept, integrate the multiple cultures and identities that go with those. So right now, where we are at our house, is I always say that they are 100% both, which mathematically doesn't work. But to say, well, you're American and you're German, and it's not like you're half and half, like you don't cut yourself in half, right? It's everywhere in you all of the time. And I try my best so when I go home to America, for example, I bring back things like candy and little whatever clothes, things that feel sort of culturally important there that they couldn't get here, and integrate it into their closets or into their, candy bowl or whatever. And so it feels normal to them, like that's what life is like, but also try to point out, well, you can't get that here in Germany. So this is something different that maybe other people around you won't experience. And the same thing being German, we go to America over the holidays, we took some candy, some holiday candy, and then did it a little bit explaining to our families about, well, there's like Nikolaustag and there's the Christkind, there's other things that go on holidays. So whether they care about it or not, it's just sort of owning the fact that all of this is a part of us, and it's in our lives. We can also choose not to care about it, right? That's also a part of this. Like, do you want that? Is this interesting to you? And how to kind of roll forward in a, like, it kind of feels a little bit, I have to say, abstract, like evolving identities. But right, as kids, their brains aren't fully formed. So how do we help them to sort of grow and accept who they are and what their life has evolved to look like, and tying together what I said earlier, and do that not knowing what the future will be like, how it will unfold. So, but I love it because I find it very challenging, and I find it very interesting, and nothing like what my childhood was like.
Yes.
A lot of things taken for granted when you're just in your culture and growing up, and this is what your life is like, but how to sort of intentionally kind of mold the environment and be aware of what's happening. I think it's fun. It's a fun challenge.
Yeah, I agree. I think it requires a lot of intentionality, and I definitely catch myself sometimes thinking, oh, if I was back home, then we would have this and we would have that. And I think that comparison is difficult, right? You do have a comparison when you've made a choice like this.
Yes.
And to be able to kind of sit with that maybe and recognize that there is that comparison, but you can still make a choice what you do with the situation that you're in and where you focus your attention, right?
Yeah. I think that makes us as let's say immigrants or foreigners or whatever you want to call us, it makes us more resilient as people because we're just very regularly in that challenge. Like my thing is, I was making chocolate chip cookies yesterday, and to make them like you do in America, you have to have special sugar, brown sugar, and vanilla that's a certain kind and not the aroma or whatever they sell here. And I, of course, brought it with me. So I'm like, yay, we get to have a special thing. And it's just like being in America and whatever. Also realizing that if I use up those resources, I'm not going to be able to make them later. So I've got to be careful about that. So how to use your resources and sort of be proud and celebrate, but also realize actually that's not my regular life now anymore. I can't just make it whenever I want, right? I've got to go with what's here. So it's a constant inner, I don't want to say struggle, but just sort of inner dialogue about is this when I'm going to be doing it? Is this what we're doing? Yes, this feels right, and never knowing.
Yeah, lots of uncertainty, I guess. That one has to sit with. Yeah. Okay. Anything else, I guess, that you would say to mothers that are in Germany?
The thing that comes to me now is a lot of people will comment on our lives. So you know what I mean?
I do.
Like the whole Robin Moocher thing, that kids should have like a gazillion layers on, that they, I don't, I feel like there's a big long list here. You know what I mean? Like just that people, or they're just looking at us staring, and it feels judgmental, whether it is or it isn't. And to tie that together with this whole conversation, I feel like the conversation becomes a big thing about letting go. How can you let go of, what other people are saying or commenting or observing about you and how you do motherhood here? Because what you have that they don't have is multicultural understanding. You know that other things also work, and you can trust that. And how can you look around at the environment here and say, actually, that's a smarter way to do that. I'm going to do that. Yeah. And mix it together. And actually, you have so much more information. And to trust, again, back to the trust point, letting go and trust that it's probably going to be all right. Yeah. Very few things actually turn out to be like worst case scenarios like we think. It's probably going to be all right. And it's all a big guessing game anyway for us all. Let's be real. As humans, we're all just guessing our way through this. So you do know some stuff, make your best guess and then move on. And when other people say stuff or give you the look or whatever, just say, well, okay, that's their perspective and it doesn't have to mean anything to me unless I choose it. And you'll have a lot less stress. I can promise you that. So it all turned out right, even though that lady gave me the side eye there on the train or whatever. It all turned out right. So the next time you see the lady with the side eye, I'd be like, I know from last time it turned out all right, so it'll be all right here. And you can feel a bit more free and a lot less stressed about, yeah, just every moment, because in parenthood and just life, right? You can choose that every moment can feel hard, or you can say it doesn't need to be, or at least not that hard.
Mm.
And also sleep a lot better.
Yeah, so true. You take me to this moment, this memory I had when I had been here maybe a few months. It wasn't long, and it was the middle of winter, and I had dressed my son how I knew from home, which is a lot warmer than here, I must say. I was still on a learning journey of how do I dress my child in this in these cold conditions.
Yeah.
And I couldn't speak the language very well at all at that point, and I was feeling a little bit like a deer in the headlights with all of this newness and overwhelmed by the
Yeah.
language, and then figuring out how to do everything. And I had the same. I had someone comment on how I had dressed my child. And it was so upsetting to me in that moment and so overwhelming. And obviously, I've come a very long way since that point. But it brings me to this idea of we are different because we come from somewhere else. I mean, I look like everybody else. So that's, I guess, an advantage in itself. But as soon as I open my mouth, then I'm not the same as everybody else. And this confrontation that I've had of I am different, and then the way that I've worked through this is okay, but that could be my strength. Like I'm leaning into how can I utilize my difference to be my strength, and what can I offer to the people around me and to the work that I'm doing because I'm different. I'm interested what your thoughts are on that in terms of
Mm. Mm. It's interesting that you use that example, because I can remember. So my oldest is 13, and when he was a toddler, this was when we visited America. We had some professional pictures taken, and I had this particular outfit that I wanted him in, but it didn't suit the weather. But I wanted the outfit anyway, because sometimes as mothers we're like that, right? Like, well, I'm doing what I want because this is what I want, right? And I remember, I mean, we're not even in a foreign country at that point. Somebody came up, how could you do that with your child? Yeah. And I'm looking at that thought 13 years later and thinking, you know what? He turned out all right. He's a
yeah
fully functioning teenager who doesn't want my opinion. So I know he's turned into a proper teenager. And it isn't easy. It isn't easy anywhere being a parent and abroad. I feel like it really comes down to, I just used to throw another word in there, is just confidence.
mm,
Confidence that there's just a lot of ways to live. Yeah. And okay, maybe the majority of the people around us here have particular ideas about noise and blinds or whatever is going on. And then there's the reality of like babies cry, like,
mhm,
and it's too noisy. Da, da, da. I'm sorry. We're, living with other humans. And I realize we all have our particular ways of wanting to be in the world, and in a foreign country, there's of course a certain, let's say, set of standards or understandings about how people will be together. And then there's the reality that, for example, this country wants more foreigners. Yeah, you're actually actively seeking more and changing the laws to make it easier to become a citizen or whatever, and and we are wanted here, even if on a granular level in these small moments it feels like, wow, I really messed this up, or like I stood out and I'm so embarrassed, or I didn't know, or whatever it was. It's just a part of it.
yeah 100%, and a lesson we have to learn, right? I
Yeah,
think some
yeah,
things are just hard when you are adjusting to something that you don't know, and
yeah,
it's going to feel hard for a time, and then sometime in the future you're going to recognize it and it becomes the norm and you find your way to deal with it.
yeah, yeah. I get less comments, and I'm not yelled at as often now as I used to. So I not sure if that's part of me is like, was that the pandemic? Like people just sort of, there was a shift in how people behave towards each other. But I also think, oh, I'm starting to integrate better. That's a sign.
Yeah,
It doesn't mean that I don't still do stuff that gets people looking or whatever, but I'm more integrated, and that's good.
yeah. What does integration mean to you?
Mm, wow, what a question. I can tell you're a
Hard
coach.
one. Sorry.
Coaches would ask that kind of question. Integration. Hmm. I mean, in my mind, because I do coaching, it's sort of how do you take the learnings in the world, for example, learning for yourself and make them a part of who you are instead of it's a thing I understand, but it's not, you know, not just in the head, it's sort of the whole body gets it. Like it's all sort of, I want to say integrated. You can't use the word to define itself. So I think it's the same culturally speaking. How do you notice maybe what is the same or different and where you are? And then how do you take some of those differences and perhaps mull them around a bit? I have a picture in my mind of sort of like a ball where you're like looking at it and like this side, that side, this side, and sort of ultimately say, yes, actually, I think that is a part of who I want to be in the world or how I want to be in the world. An example of that would be, I'm thinking, okay, this is an easy one where everybody I think may relate. Well, how I grew up in America is we didn't recycle. We didn't recycle anything.
Mm-hmm.
I know in the meantime that there are many parts of America where people are recycling, but my formative years was not recycling. And of course, in my mind, I totally agree with it. Yes, we're recycling. It's helpful for the planet. Like, let's, reduce, reuse, all of these things. Logically, it makes sense. But can I get my body to do the thing? And it was very hard in the beginning to understand. And I think in Germany, it may be different how the recycling goes. But where I am, to understand which thing goes in which thing, I think it took me years. I logically wanted to do it. I understood what was going on and I was in. But the rest of me couldn't, in the moment, sort properly. And that, with time, is sort of the integration, right? It's seeing the change potential thing that maybe is put in front of you as a rule or as just a sort of a norm you feel like is going on around you. Understand it, toss it around in your head, and then your body comes along. Yeah. So that's at least my understanding of integration and how I've experienced it myself. And I am a master recycler now. At least I think I am. Maybe there would be many out there who would disagree. And now when I go back to America and I don't see it, it's the reverse. It's like, oh, how could you not be? How do we sort this even though I know it's not going to happen? And it's the reverse point. And what an interesting thing to notice about integration is then when you have integrated and then you're challenged with what you used to be like and be like, whoa, I've come a long way. Really come a long way. So what a great question.
So like a naturalization of the processes.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. And then obviously that some of that takes time, and it's just a matter of learning and then figuring out your way through it. And maybe there's also some things that you can do or the ways that you can think about this in order to make it easier. What do you think? What would you tell people if they're struggling, they're not feeling like they're integrated yet, and they want to feel a little bit more comfort or a little bit further along?
Yeah, it's for sure sitting with what feels uncomfortable. Like, I'm a smart person and I'm standing in front of recycled garbage cans. Like, why can't I figure this out? Why is this so hard for me? Yeah, just even noticing that and owning it and also being nice to yourself. Like, yeah, but you didn't do this for the last 30 years. Like, so this is new. So of course this is going to be challenging for you, even though logically it seems very simple. And also asking people again and again. And I think this is one of the greatest parts about learning that I feel like a lot of people either shortcut or avoid is I don't want to admit I don't know in front of somebody else. So they just avoid it. Like, nope, I'm just going to keep doing my thing and wait until I don't know, get in trouble or something goes wrong or whatever. Or to continue to ask, but I don't understand. I don't understand what is meant here. Help me in asking different people, because oftentimes different people will explain the challenge or how to be with it in a different way. And some of us, I am one of those people, maybe not everybody out there is that way, but I sometimes just need to hear it a bunch of different ways until it clicks for me. And it probably was the first way it was explained, but for whatever reason, I didn't get it. So I just need to keep asking and to reach out. So whether you do it online or you do it in person, like, I just don't understand why parking in this spot is a problem. I don't see a sign. I don't see the markings. Like, what is the problem? Why do I keep getting in trouble for parking here? And to ask and until you start to understand that there's actually a lot of unspoken rules, right? And maybe even written rules, but it's just not spelled out in a way that is obvious to you. Like, until you get it, right? And to be patient with yourself, because it's an onslaught here. Let's be honest, right? I mean, I was able to transfer my driver's license just by going in the application. I didn't have to do all the stuff. Lucky me, right? But also unlucky me, because there's some stuff that isn't intuitive to me. Like, I come from a place where there are not red turn signal lights. You just go
right
on green. So I had to unlearn that in order to, I just have to wait. It's a red turn. It seems obvious, right? It seems so obvious, but it was really a hard habit. I had been driving for, 10, 15 years before I had to like learn that. And it's the same thing with the right side has the right of way. Here, we don't, at least where I come from in America, that's not normal. And that was, I had a lot of almost misses, near misses on those, where I just was like, oh, it's so embarrassing. I'm a good driver. I'm paying attention, but that's a really hard one. And so it's stuff like that, this again and again and again. I mean, look, going to the grocery store, going to the post office, doctor's appointments, it's all different. And to continue to just sort of say to yourself, okay, well, that part didn't go so great. Next time I will be more prepared, or I'll think it through, or just know that there are going to be surprises and expect that.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, I am just looking at the time and feeling like we should start to wrap up, but I'm wondering if there's anything that you would just like to leave people with. Maybe it's just a summary of the conversation that we've had and the things that you're taking away from it, or whether you've got something else.
Yeah. It's going to be like a summary / wisdom. So like, if I can look back at myself when I first moved to Germany, I would say to myself, you're gonna be in this culture for a long time, or multiple times, and you're gonna be in ways that you can't predict right now. Like, I didn't predict in my mind that I would have kids here. I didn't predict that I would work here in my original profession. I didn't predict that I would have a business. So you're going to be doing things here that you haven't predicted. You're going to meet challenges that are going to feel insurmountable, and you're not going to have the resources like you used to. And you're going to get through it. And you're going to get through it because the challenge of the experience of overcoming the challenge is the point. That's the point of all of this. That whatever you're meeting that feels new or different or an issue, the point of life, now I'm getting existential, is to experience it. Yeah. And how else do you know that you're alive if you sometimes don't put the lemon in your mouth and go, ew, this is bitter or intense, right? And then you take the lemon out and you're like, how did that get there? Like, the point is to overcome the challenges, and you will. And you will. And you will. And we're living proof, both of us, right, Anne? We are living proof that you don't perish through the experience, and you get stronger, and you start to do things in your life that you never thought you would ever do, and that maybe have felt impossible, but because you've grown those strengths out of taking advantage of the challenges.
That's so powerful. What a way to end. Thank you so much. If people are inspired and want to connect with you, how can they get in touch?
Yeah. So the best way to find me is on LinkedIn, actually. I post there every day, which is, speaking of challenges that I never thought I would overcome, that's a whole another conversation for another day. So I'm on LinkedIn every day talking about my work, and that's the easiest way to find me. And I also go under the moniker the inner advocate. So that's a play on coaching and the legal profession. I have a website, the inner advocate. You can look me up there. And maybe you see me on the street. My son very aptly says I look like the Grinch when I wear this green. I love kids, right? They're so real. So I thought I would wear it today so nobody would forget me in case people were watching. But maybe you see me on the street and it's just like your experience, Anne. Like I look like I blend in. Like I look like I get asked directions all the time, which is always funny to me because I'm like, wow, my German isn't that great. But if you do see me, like say hi because I get it. I get this experience and I'm actually enjoying it. And if you're out there and you're like, I'm not enjoying it, there is another side and you can get there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Laura. It's been a
You're welcome.
pleasure.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye.
Bye.